In this lesson, we're going to do factor by grouping, and then also we're going to factor using sums and difference of cubes. This first example says factor the expression by grouping. So right now you have 2, and then you have times the quantity x minus 3. Then you have negative n times the quantity x minus 3. If you think of these as two separate terms, you want to look at them and say, what do they have in common that you could factor to the front? And you'll notice their parentheses are the same, so we can factor x minus 3 to the front. So when you factor x minus 3 out to the front, you're left with 2 minus n. So here's our final answer, x minus 3 times 2 minus n. We're going to do the same thing for part B. Think of this as two separate terms, and if you ask yourself what do they have in common, you see that they both have an x plus 1 in common. So we're going to factor out x plus 1 to the front. So this one's kind of strange. When you factor x plus 1 out of itself, you're left with just positive 1. And then when you factor x plus 1 out of this term, you're left with plus y. So here's your final answer. Part C looks a little different because it's not starting with parentheses. So what we're going to do is we kind of think of this in parts. For this first part, you can see that the greatest common factor would be x squared. So we're going to factor that out. When you factor out x squared from both of these terms, you're left with x minus 7. Over here you can factor out 4. You're going to also be left with x minus 7 in the parentheses. So now this problem finally looks like the first two. Think of this and this as two separate terms, and then ask yourself, what do they have in common? And you can see their parentheses are the same, so we can factor out x minus 7 to the front. And when you factor out the x minus 7 from both terms and move it to the front, you're left with x squared plus 4. You just leave your answer like this. For this next example, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to split it down the middle. Make sure when you split it, you leave this negative with the 9. So for these first two terms, we're going to factor out x squared, and then you're left with x plus 7. Over here, we're going to factor out negative 9. And when you factor out a negative 9 from both terms, you're also left with x and a positive 7. At this point, you can see that the x plus 7s can come out to the very front, and then you're left with x squared minus 9. This problem is going to factor further because right here you have a difference of squares. So we're going to drop this x plus 7 down, and the x squared minus 9 is going to factor to x plus 3 times x minus 3. So here's our final answer. For this problem, we're going to factor out x squared, and then over here we're going to factor out negative 16. When you factor out x squared, you're left with x minus 3, and over here when you factor out negative 16, you're going to be left with x minus 3 as well, because the negative times the negative makes the positive 48. Next, we're going to factor out the x minus 3 to the very front, and that means you're left with x squared minus 16. This right here is a difference of squares, so we're going to factor this further. So the x squared minus 16 becomes x plus 4 times x minus 4. And here's our final answer. For this next problem, we're going to factor out 4x squared from both of these terms. Just want to make sure 4x squared times x makes 4x cubed. And 4x squared times 2 makes 8x squared. Over here, we're going to factor out negative 9, and you're left with x plus 2. So at this point, we're going to factor out the x plus 2's to the very front. And again, at this point, this part is a difference of squares, so we're going to factor it further. We're going to use 2x times 2x, and then we're going to use plus 3 minus 3. And there's our final answer. Next, we're going to factor a sum and difference of cubes. So right here, we have a cubed plus b cubed, and we have a cubed minus b cubed. In order to factor anything of this form, you're going to use a small parentheses and a big one. Then it goes ab, a squared, a times b, b squared, and then we're going to use the acronym SOAP to fill in the signs. SOAP stands for same, opposite, always, positive. So what we're going to do is right here we're going to fill in the same sign as the original problem. So the same sign is going to be a plus. So it goes same, opposite, always, positive. So opposite is going to be the opposite of this sign, and then this is always positive. We're going to do the same thing right here. The original problem is a cubed minus b cubed, so the sign starts off the original problem with a negative. So we go same, opposite, always, positive, and that's how you fill in your signs. So right here I have listed some perfect cubes, so when you see 1, 8, 27, 64, and so on, that's your hint that you're going to most likely be using sums and difference of cubes. So right here we have x cubed minus 125. So this is a perfect cube, and this is also a perfect cube. Because of the whole acronym SOAP, I'm going to go with that theme and call these bubbles. What I want to do first is I want to fill in the bubbles. What cubed makes x cubed, and what cubed makes 125? So to fill in your bubbles, you're going to fill in an x and a 5. Get it? SOAP, bubbles? Okay. So anyways, now that we have our bubbles, this is A and this is B. To factor anything in this form, of a cubed minus b cubed, or a cubed plus b cubed, we're going to use a little and big parentheses, and then you're going to fill in a squared, b squared, and then the signs go SOAP. So instead of a, we're going to put x. Instead of b, we're going to put a 5. Right here, it's a squared, so we're going to take x and square it. A times b, so we're going to multiply them together. B squared is we're going to take this and square it. And finally, signs go SOAP. Same, opposite, always positive. And again, you're using this as your reference. So we go same, opposite, always positive. And here's our answer. X cubed minus 125 factors to this expression right here. And because of the way the factor pattern works, this part will not factor further. So that's going to be your final answer. All right, we have x cubed plus 216. So first step is I want to identify our bubbles. So again, the bubbles are just to help us find a and b. So what cubed makes x cubed, and what cubed makes 216? So let's look at the chart above. So according to this chart, 6 cubed is 216. So this is our a and this is our b. So fill in your little and big parentheses, and it goes a, b, then it goes a squared, a times b, b squared. So we have x squared, 6x, 36. And last step, signs go SOAP. So look at your original problem, and we go same, opposite, always positive. So x cubed plus 216 factors to this answer right here. For this problem, we have x cubed minus 343 y to the third. First step is fill in the bubbles. So right here, we're going to fill in 7y because we have 343y cubed. This is a, this is b. So we start by putting a, b. Next, it goes a squared. Right here is a times b. So we're going to multiply these together, and I just wrote it as 7xy. And then last, we're going to do 7y squared. So 7y times 7y is 49y squared. And fill in the signs. The signs go SOAP. Same, opposite, always positive. So here's our final answer. Okay, for this problem, let's go ahead and fill in our bubbles. We're going to do 2x and 3y. Draw your little and big parentheses, and then go a, b, then a squared, a times b, multiply these together, and over here is b squared. So make sure to square this. 3y times 3y makes 9y squared. And then fill in your signs using SOAP. So here's your final answer.